Intrusive thoughts are invasive, unwanted, distressing, and scary, and they can cause you a lot of distress, and they can feel really overwhelming to you because they're usually wildly inappropriate. Many people keep them internally. They don't share them with people because they're afraid of what others might think of them or that others might judge them. So intrusive thoughts can come in many forms and categories. They can be sexual, they can be harm, they can be about religion and morality, they can be about yourself and who you think you are as a person. They could come in what if form. So like, what if I do this thing? What if I can't control myself? What if I drive myself off the side of the road? Or they can come in the form of what sounds like a command, like do it, stab your friend, throw the baby out the window, trip your grandma. People that struggle with intrusive thoughts like this, specifically around the things that are considered to be taboo, end up withdrawing from things that they love and people they love and activities they love because they are so afraid that they're actually going to lose control and carry out these things. Most people that struggle with intrusive thoughts tend to have anxiety or OCD. And I want to go into some tips that actually work for intrusive thoughts. These come from acceptance and commitment therapy, which is one of the therapy modalities that works amazingly for people that struggle with anxiety, OCD, and intrusive thoughts, because it's not about changing the content of your thoughts. It's really about changing how you relate to the thoughts so that they no longer control your life. Tip number one, and you may have seen this in my other videos because I will always give this tip when talking about intrusive thoughts because I believe it's so important and so vital for how we begin to engage with these thoughts, is to say, I'm having the thought before each intrusive thought. So it could go something like this. If you walk in somewhere, you see a baby, you're holding the baby, and then all of a sudden you get this thought of, I could drop the baby. What if I drop the baby? Or do it, drop the baby. What I want you to say is, I'm having the thought about dropping the baby. Get used to saying, I'm having the thought before each intrusive thought. I'm having the thought, I'm going to stab myself with this knife. I'm having the thought, I want to drive myself off the side of the road. Putting that simple phrase before each intrusive thought helps remind your brain that these are thoughts. The problem with intrusive thoughts is we internalize them, we believe them, we think that we have to follow through with them, or what if we follow through with them? So simply placing, I'm having the thought before each intrusive thought helps create that separation between the thought and who you are, helps remind you that it is a thought and that you still have control. My second tip is something that you've probably heard a lot, and I'm going to debunk this type of therapy that is very common out there when it comes to intrusive thoughts. Do not engage with your intrusive thoughts. So that means no thought stopping, no thought challenging, and no thought replacing. Your brain does not like to think in negatives. And the more that you try to push a thought away or replace a thought, the more that thought is going to present itself. So if you have a thought about dropping the baby and then you start engaging by saying, oh, here are 2 reasons why I don't want to drop the baby. 1, I love babies. And 2, this is my family. Or if you start doing something like, okay, replace the thought. Oh, look, a camera. That's so nice. Oh, the bird is out the window. What you're doing is trying to cause thought suppression. And thought suppression does not work. Thought suppression actually makes things worse because we're basically sending the signal to our brain that we shouldn't be having that thought, and having that thought is dangerous. And because of that, it throws you more into fight or flight, which means that in the long run, that thought is just going to be bigger and bigger and bigger. And then when you're not successful at stopping the thought or replacing the thought and it keeps coming back, you take the blame and you start developing more shame because you think something's wrong with you for not being able to stop the thought in the first place. Tip number 3, work on self-compassion. And one of the ways that you can do that is simple. It's simply just reminding yourself that intrusive thoughts are part of anxiety and part of OCD. So if you struggle with any of those 2 things, this is very common for you. And it can happen to anyone as well. So if you struggle with intrusive thoughts and you don't have an anxiety disorder and you don't have OCD, it can come up in times of stress or hormonal changes. For instance, if you do have a baby and you're so worried and your whole life has changed now. So I want you to just remind yourself that this is just part of being a human sometimes. And it says nothing about who you are. It says nothing about your values. It says nothing about what you actually want to do. Tip number 4, this is the hardest one. Do not avoid your triggers. The more that you avoid, the more you send that signal to your brain that there is danger there. If we avoid knives, your brain learns to associate knives with danger, which means that next time you're around a knife, your anxiety and your intrusive thoughts around that knife is going to be much bigger. But if you expose yourself to the knife, if you're able to chop up that tomato, notice that thought coming up, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about stabbing my friend, and you remind yourself, I'm having the thought, I want to stab my friend, and continue chopping up that tomato, then what you've just done is show your brain who's really in control. You are. You had the thought, you didn't follow through with the thought, you continued what you were doing. What will happen over time is you start exposing yourself to those triggers, and your brain will start losing that association that this thing or this person is dangerous. And finally, and always my final tip, if your intrusive thoughts are really taking over you, if you really feel like they're super overwhelming and you don't know what to do with them, you can't even get to these steps when it's really impacted your functioning, get professional help. There are so many therapeutic modalities out there that can help you with this. Acceptance and commitment therapy is one of them. Exposure and response prevention is another one that are specifically tailored to people that have intrusive thoughts and high levels of anxiety and OCD. These modalities of therapy really help with acceptance. They help you develop a different relationship with your thoughts rather than making you change or analyzing why you're having the thoughts. Any sort of talk therapy around, why am I having this thought? Why is it like this? Where did this come from? That can become a form of a compulsion and reassurance seeking, which can really make this worse. So what you want to do is really work on acceptance with a therapist, working on exposing yourself to the triggers and helping yourself regulate your nervous system in that moment and be able to move about your life despite having these thoughts. I hope that this video was helpful to you. If you struggle with intrusive thoughts, let me know in the comments below what questions you have about this. I know this is a very big topic. I know that there's a lot of misinformation out there about it. Chat with me below, ask me your questions, and as always, I will see you in the next video.